Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, panel, for coming out and listening to everyone. It's a very important thing you're doing. So I'm Jaqui Pascuale. Was born on the river, the Lower Darling, the very last property before the Lower Murray-Weir influence, or before the Murray-Weir influence. So the block bank that's recently been put in is just below our property. I could talk a lot about that, and actually Megan, who came with me, she's from Bourke. So we do have experiences on the river, including, you know, my 75-year-old mother having to have water taken in from Wentworth because she can't drink the water. And certainly those things are all you've probably been told about before. But I wanted to talk specifically about the triple bottom line and the smoke and mirrors associated with the triple bottom line, especially in terms of health or social impacts. So Megan and I both work with Aboriginal families, and yesterday we went to collect one of our young people. He hasn't engaged with school for a long time, and we've been having trouble just getting him to come along to these particular things. But we had an Aboriginal artist who was going to mentor him, and he was really keen to come along. And we explained what the mural was going to be about. So the mural is going to be about two Murray cod who live in the Darling, and they meet up at the junction. So there's a little bit of a story about that. But his mother, when she heard about this mural, said, well, the river. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? These kids can't be healthy without the river. You know, these kids can't be healthy. And she doesn't just mean physically, and it's hard to explain, it's hard to articulate. It's not just spiritually, it's not just psychically. It's not just that everything we hear on the river, about the river on the media is in terms of hopelessness and death and decay. It's not just that. But all of those things do compact to make a feeling of helplessness and hopelessness, I guess, not just in Aboriginal people, because certainly the children I work with in Pooncarie have a similar feeling, you know, it'll never rain again. Oh, it will rain. No, it won't rain again. There's a whole lot of internal narrative, I guess, about all we hear, which seems to be very devoid of hope. So this mother was saying that, you know, the health of her children is directly impacted by the health of the river. And that's what the mural that Uncle Ivan and Uncle Peter, who work at Jaqui, are doing in our health promotion area where Megan and I work. So the Murray being a totem and also being, you know, caretakers in a way of the river, and the fact that, as Rob said, you know, they're endangered, and we lost many during the last fish kill as well, is a very visible sign, and I guess it's one of the reasons why all of a sudden national, international awareness has been brought to this issue. It's sad that it took that, but it does take visible, very concrete things for people to understand what's going on. But specifically around the social triple bottom line, the social impacts, notwithstanding that the economical impacts are completely fabricated, or the benefits are completely fabricated, and that the amount of jobs for the pipeline and for anything happening in Queensland will never be made up for by the suicides that have occurred in Menindee and along the river, and for the loss of jobs and businesses in Menindee. And the pipeline, the big argument was it would have jobs attached to it. Well, yes, jobs for 3 months, that's how long it took to build. Of all the losses that occurred during that building, just in terms of economic losses was huge, but the social losses were even more palpable. So 30 people suicided in the February of that year in Menindee. People do suicide, but it was 30 that month. And part of that was, and, you know, and I can't guarantee this, but the discussion with all the Aboriginal groups around the pipeline and around all these things to do with water and all the bargaining that was going on was very hard, I think, for people to not understand so much. But how do we work with this? How this is going to happen? How do we save what little we can? How do we negotiate in this political framework? So the social losses are very hard to explain, but I think unless we really logically look at and clearly look at the social losses, the real losses, so not just health, not just suicides, not just jobs, But the fact that the loss of a whole river system and a Murray-Darling basin, the way we're going, the loss of the whole basin, is really the death of our nation, in a real sense, not just in an emotional sense. What happened to the abrasion of the Darling will happen to the Murrumbidgee next, and the Murray very, very shortly after it. And all the decisions being made are for short-term gain, very, very short-term gain. All major parties have been complicit since the 70s, when the damming of the tributaries in the Upper Darling was done under Rann through a friend of his wife before the loophole was fixed. Because you can't dam rivers, but you can dam tributaries. What happens when you dam tributaries? Nothing goes in the river. So the floodplain management has just continued from that whole understanding of, the river starts here, not there. That's not factual. The Darling River starts in the floodplains. It's ephemeral because it starts, in a very wide catchment area. So when they were all dammed, for economic reasons, no doubt, it was for very short-term gain. So we're going to have long-term impacts for very short-term gain, if any gain at all, when you actually balance it, where the real balance is not just smoke and mirrors. Anyway, that's all I really wanted to say. I could go on, but I wanted to leave this with you. So this is some of our elders, some Barkingie elders, showing some children how to paint the Murray cod, and that mural will be up on the wall. And that's great. That's important, but it doesn't fix the problem. They've got green on one side and water flowing, and they've got brown on the other side. And I'll just read you out what, this is Uncle Ivan's words. Pundu Cod Dreaming. The mural is about how the river is important to First Nation people of the Darling and Murray River. It shows how important it is for humans. It's our bloodline, where our ancestors were living so many generations along the river within their tribal boundaries. Our elders sat around fires and told stories of creation, of how the cod, it travelled upstream and downstream. Plants and animals thrive on water, and if there is no water, there is no life.
Before you go, Jaqui, we'll include a picture and an image of that in the...
You can have that if you like.
Yes, thank you. Can you talk perhaps a little bit about the kinds of solutions you'd personally like to see happen, whether it's to water supplies or community involvement, or what kind of solutions that you see have to happen?
Well, I think one self-fix that would happen, a self-correction that could happen really easily, is that all the planned developments, agricultural developments happening along the Murray, if the people putting money into the superannuation plans that are fueling those were told that in 4 years their crops would be dead and their money would dry up, they might not put money into superannuation, and the superannuation funds might not develop those areas, and that's a reality. They won't. The superannuation funds will keep the money, the developers will get something out of it, but the people who put the money into the super funds will not have any money because it can't be maintained. So that's one, economical self-correction that I think would be fairly easy to promote, especially if you went to a financial magazine. Floodplain harvesting has to change. That and water sharing have been the two things that really impacted in a very concrete way. Things were going wrong since way back in the 70s and 80s, and everything that was done was in response to those things that clearly weren't working. But when you trade from the Darling into the Murrumbidgee, when there's no water in the Darling, that's not even logical. There's no water to trade. So again, the smoke and mirrors comes into play, and the monetisation of water needs to... I'm not saying it shouldn't ever happen, but you can't be trading water when there's no water. You can't be using water in 2 years' time when there was no water 2 years earlier. Water has to be a concrete thing. Let's make water a concrete thing, and everyone I've ever spoken to agrees that connectivity of the river system is, and maybe the moving of some of the constraints, maybe the re-engineering of some of the constraints, if we're going to talk about changing things around the Barmah Choke and other places, so that maybe if we need to have levee banks higher or bridges higher or roads higher or whatever we need to do to allow the river to flow, making that our priority, not the other things, then I think that would be a big benefit as well.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you so much for making the time in your lunch break on a busy day.
Yes, we'll go now.
Thank you for coming.
For you.
Down there.